and welcome to B Shifter. John Vance here along with Josh Bloom. And today a very special guest, Shane Ray, is here. He's from the National Fire Sprinkler Association, and he's not only the president of that organization, but also a longtime fire chief, firefighter, and a real expert in the field of fire extinguishment when it comes to fire protection systems in buildings. And we've had Shane on before on our Big Box Bulletin, which, by the way, is one of our most popular episodes we've ever put out. So we're happy to have you back. You're here right now doing a big box workshop at the AVB-CTC in Phoenix. It was a great class today. You do an awesome job delivering this message and this material, and I learned a lot today. How are you doing?
Fantastic. It's great to be here with B Shifter. It's great to be at the CTC. Always loved coming to Phoenix, where I was an intern back 100 years ago, and so miss Bruno every day, but it's always good to be back with you guys, hanging out, sharing the word. And as Josh said when we opened up today, we're just trying to make a little bit of a difference.
And for those who don't know, you did an internship here for a while in the 90s, right?
I was a summer intern here in either 92 or 93, I believe. So spent the summer, lived at Station 18, and of course spent the rest of my career coming back and forth here with baggers and all the good things that Bruno had going on. He was always so good to me.
Well, first of all, what has been the successes since the last time we talked? We know we're continuing to get fires in big box buildings. We're seeing it happen all the time. We're seeing it in my area, throughout the country. What are some of the successes that we can build on and best practices that you've seen that have helped in these situations?
Well, being in the class today, you hear from the students that they say, hey, I'm being patient, I'm listening, I'm learning. The awareness level is increased. They're like, I had no idea about all these things that we're talking about. So again, it's great having fire command officers, chief fire officers, operations, tactical people sit in the room here, and especially those guys and gals that have been in prevention and things. It all opens their eyes putting it together. And as I told them, that's what my mission is to bring the fire protection world, the fire sprinkler contractor, the firefighters, the fire chiefs, fire officers, fire marshals, fire sprinkler contractors, everybody to the table, right? And say, hey, this problem is all of ours to solve. And the word is getting out. We've heard some successes. Josh shared the success maybe in an area. We've heard from some of our friends in Minnesota that said, hey, we pulled up, we hooked up, we pumped the system, we were patient. So that's what we want. It's like slow down, gather all your things together, make sure you can get to know and understand what you're dealing with, and we're happy the word's getting out.
Do you think that's the biggest, if there was one message that you want to get out to the fire commanders out there listening, because there's commanders and people who are coming up through the ranks that are going to be ICs, what's the one message you'd want to send to them?
I think I like our message of when you pull up, hook up. It's like we said today, there's a reason we call it the fire department connection. It's like it's put there for you to pull up, supplement the sprinkler system with extra water, and do a good job with it. And then get all your resources ready. Know your buildings, know your first due. Get out there, spend time in it. But the simple message is pull up, hook up. And then the second message is do not shut the system down until you're sure the fire's out. And that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to spread is one size don't fit all. You don't operate the same way in a single family dwelling as you do a high rise. You don't operate the same way in a Cracker Barrel you do in a Walmart distribution center. You don't pull up to a cold storage warehouse and treat it the same way you would a 20,000 square foot mercantile Ace Hardware. So all those things are where we're trying to get everybody to understand. Two, that they're operating with many more sprinklered buildings than we've ever seen in our careers. There's been a 70% increase in the number of occupancies required to be protected with automatic sprinklers since 1980. That's most of our careers. And then you think, well, everybody's got it. But it's like, no, like you said, there's a whole new group of firefighters, whole new group of apparatus operators, whole new group of fire marshals, incident commanders, fire chiefs, city government. It's like our message will never stop.
One thing when you said earlier today, you asked the question, who's familiar with NFPA 13E? And everybody looked and it was kind of crickets, right? And you said, I'm waiting. Like, what? Is anybody going to answer the question? I'm patient. And nobody responded. And then you started down that path. Hey, we're going to talk about this, and then you threw out some things that, like the one thing you already said, the fire department connection. We need to pull up and hook up. So when you said that, I was watching pretty close. We got 3, I think, people ended up in this class. Almost every person in the room stopped and wrote that down. And it's like, well, that's a win, right? It seems like common sense, but it's not so common sense, because, we're hearing on the other side of the events where they pull up, got called to a fire alarm drop, it turns into a fire, they didn't hook to the fire department connection, and then they get not too far down the road, they get down the path so far that they just totally forget, because other critical factors start popping up. So that whole thing, I think, comes back to, once you know, and that's this message. You're telling them facts, I think is what you said. Hey, I'm telling you facts. You got to make your own decisions. But I think that's where it ties back to the strategic decision-making model of the critical factors. The house fire isn't the big box, isn't the high rise, isn't the mobile home on fire, but those are all different critical factors, and that's where we have to start with the decision-making. So, when we go to a hazmat incident, we treat it different too. And, we always bring up the EMS incident, right? Like, chest pains. Well, when you get the chest pains, you don't just shock them. You evaluate the critical factors, if you will, or what the patient's showing with. Well, when we pull up on a building fire, far too often we get pulled into what we do all the time, which we know those statistics are 80 or so percent are residential type buildings, and we're not making decisions. So hopefully these, I think really like 5 or 6 things, Shane, is if they just do these 5 or 6 things, they're going to be much more successful on a big box. And hopefully they can take those facts, figure out how they plug them into their own organization, and make that make sense.
Yeah, and it was shocking that out of the 40 people we had in there, not a soul had heard of NFPA 13E, which is the recommended practice for fire department operations in buildings protected with automatic sprinklers, right? And then you couple that with NFPA 1620, which is the pre-planned side of that said, hey, these documents all go together. A lot of people spend a lot of time putting them together for a reason. And then, two, to simply summarize those, when you supply them with the information that says, hey, when you pull up, hook up, do not shut the sprinkler system down to improve visibility, right? And to try to get away from this cold smoke. You heard me pushing all day that says, hey, this smoke is pressurized. It's hot, especially in these big box facilities, especially in these gigantic distribution centers. It's like there's still a lot of fire in that piece. So pull up, hook up, don't shut down. Do not ventilate. The sprinkler system is not made to function with ventilation. There has to be a lid on it, right? That's how it collects the heat to do its job, is because there's something above it that pushes the heat down to where it is to operate. And so when you get those things, and then two, once you do get to where visibility improves in the building, then it says in 13E when to start doing manual control ventilation. But during that time, do not shut the sprinkler off. And then the most shocking thing I find as I travel around and work with my colleagues still in the business, it's like, you know what? They had no idea that 1 million square foot facility is supposed to operate for 2 hours on its own. Am I saying stand outside and wait for 2 hours and let her work? It's like, no, you got a lot of things to do. Get somebody to the fire pump. Make sure it's running. Make sure it's holding pressure. Get somebody to the riser. Make sure the riser that you know in this bank of 8 risers, okay, these 2 are flowing water, or only one's flowing water. Or find out what that is and then isolate that area so you know this is my fire area. Somewhere between here and the other side of that building is where this fire is. It's not 600 feet to the left or 600 feet to the right. It's probably right straight ahead in this area. So everybody has been, it's just good to see them hungry for the information. It's so rewarding for me to get the feedback that says, hey, I didn't know that and I want more. And that's where, again, Blue Card, thank you for what you all are doing, and B-Shifter for getting the word out, because it is making a difference. We're seeing saves, and anytime you can have a success on this that don't spike the charts that says, oh, we had a $750 million loss, that's immeasurable.
I think something else I heard today is was like the first 2 hours somebody said, I got my money's worth already. I can go home right now, and I really need to get home and change this before something happens. And it's like that's a powerful thing too. And that came, both of those people got over 25 years in the fire department, and both of them worked for fire departments that got over 20 fire stations. And it's like, yeah, we have to do something different. But I think it probably aligns with something you said, that 70 or 80% increase in these sprinkler buildings being put up all over the country, and we're seeing a spike in the events that were going there just because there's going to be events, and now there's sprinkler systems, and we're just not as familiar with it as and that we really should be. So I think though it's not new, I think whatever 1905, whatever the number was, that's irrelevant really, I guess. But it's not new. It's something that we're just seeing more, so it's on our radar. So we're trying to do something with it. And for us, if everybody leaves here with one thing and it makes a difference, then it's a win. So
yeah, absolutely. And the good thing is to get the information out there, knowing that, hey, a Walmart store is different than a distribution center. A Dollar General store is different than a Walmart. It's like knowing those things. A residential, a high-rise. Like we said, we don't want you to turn the sprinkler off in the distribution centers or those with automated retrieval systems. It's like, let the sprinkler work until you know that you can get visibility and you can see. But if you go to a Hampton Inn and there's an e-cigarette on a bed and you walk in and it's like, hey, this fire is contained to the room of origin. I got an 1 3/4 hose line in the hallway with a backup line at the stairs. Okay, let's go to each floor at the end of the hallway and shut that floor control valve. Because when we shut the floor control valve off, open the main drain in that floor control valve, we'll stop the water damage and we won't ruin a bunch of rooms. But when the Walmart's on fire and it's got flames licking the ceiling, everything in that thing's probably going to be thrown out. And so when you do that, it's like that's where we're putting on the burden that says, hey, don't get caught with your pants down. You can walk in the front of the store, see a fire in the back, and it's like, whoa, I got this. It's like, no, it's going to get nasty and ugly in there in about 10 minutes. And in that big box, within a half hour or an hour, you're going to lose visibility in almost all of it. You got to plan for those things. But unfortunately, which is a good thing, we don't have a lot of experience with operating in that environment. So we're getting more of that. We're trying to do some training. We have our valve trailers. So we have a valve trailer in the Chicago land area, New Jersey, have one in Tennessee and one in Maryland, about to put one in Milwaukee. So again, we're trying to get these out. We're trying to work with fire departments also on their training centers to get them to where it's like, okay, have you a wet pipe and a dry pipe and a fire department connection? So you can just get your people comfortable so they're not intimidated when they pull up. It's like, oh, I'm not supposed to touch that. It's like, well, hey, there's times when we don't want you to touch it, but there's times when we want you to turn it off. So how do you make the difference between that? And I think this program's certainly been good to help us get that word out and making them hungry for more.
So I want to hit on something here that it's been floating across all the social media platforms for the last couple of weeks about, and it's a question kind of thing, but it's a question to get people to think of who is training your firefighters. And most recently, I think in the last few days, there was a question put out of who's training your chiefs or command staff. And I think that's something to be careful with. And, for us, if we're talking about sprinklered buildings, we want the National Fire Sprinkler Association people there that know about the system, right? And, there's a lot of things going on out there with, if you pull up and there's a fire pump, don't hook to the fire department connection. And it's like, well, who's saying that? Where's that coming from? What does that really mean? And I mean, there's somebody in this class that said that today, like, well, we were told that if there's a fire pump that we never hook to it. And it's like, well, how do you know what's really going on with the fire pump? And you've hit on that a bunch of, well, what happens when that thing shuts down or it's not really doing what it's supposed to, or somebody shut a valve? And it's just taken me to the next thing of something that has been said at all 3 or 4 of these workshops we've done with you all is, well, when you pump the fire department connection, you're bypassing the pump anyway because you're pumping over the top of it. Well, they didn't know that. And when that question comes up, it's like, well, who told you that? So it just comes back to like, who's training your firefighters, which just brings me back to we should be connecting with the people who know, and it's facts, not somebody out there who, for whatever reason, is spewing their opinion.
Yeah. Same thing. We heard somebody that taught a class in an area that said, hey, immediately take out the skylights. And it's like, hey, that's the furthest thing from the truth, right? You definitely do not want to do that in a sprinklered building. Same thing with the fire department connections. It's like, don't hook to that. It's a 2,500 gallon a minute pump in some of those. Yeah, but some of them, it's only a 1,000 gallon a minute pump. But you don't know in the 2,500 gallon a minute or the 1,000 gallon a minute pump whether the system's been overrun or not. And so we did the research. We showed the videos today. We did the research. attic sprinkler in a typical occupancy that's a building with a mechanic shop. And so it's like, hey, it activated, we purposely had the system turned off, and it activated all the sprinklers in the space. But we put 1 2.5-inch connection, and within 3 minutes, the fire was under control. And so it's like, that's why you hook up. It is there to supplement the capabilities that's already there. And again, we're hearing more and more stories, and if you're out there listening, it's like, share those stories with us. We love to promote the success. Every Friday, I put out an email called Spotlight on Sprinklers that goes to all of our members that, again, tries to dial the fire department into the sprinkler world and vice versa, right? So that the sprinkler people understand the fire. Dan Madrikowski said, Shane, you're the man in the middle here. It's like you got the sprinkler folks who don't necessarily understand the fire, and you have the fire folks who don't understand the sprinkler. So it's like, hey, that's what I do every day I get up, is let's go bring that all together. Because, we do have the solution. We do have the solution to keep people from dying in buildings, and we have the solution to keep firefighters from dying in buildings, and we dang sure can mitigate all of their exposures by getting water on the fire fast. And that, again, goes back to, I was just in South Carolina, and that goes back to Spartanburg burns. It was 9 years ago. One of our instructors there shared, hey, here's a picture of you standing in the street 9 years ago. And I'm like, and unfortunately, we've had some firefighter fatalities since then. I'm like, they probably didn't even know about Spartanburg burns. And when we do that, that's where I do take that personal. I'm like, you know what? We failed. We let them down. But then I come here and I hear, hey, in Arizona, we're still using Thinking Firefighters, which is from Spartanburg burns, to train our firefighters here in Arizona as a state class. So I'm like, say it's working, and we're all doing good. We're just trying to get the message out and make a difference. And if we can save a firefighter, save some property, and save some occupants, good for everybody.
I think you touched on it a little bit about firefighters being uncomfortable with either the pump or just how the system works. You have those trailers. What's the objective of those trailers, and how can someone access them for training at their department?
Yeah, so you can go online and see the trailers and put in a request for them. Now, naturally, it's hard for us to fill all the requests we get, but we still like to do that regionally. And again, the trailers are functional fire sprinkler systems. So from the fire department connection, you pull up, you hook up, you flow it. The fire officer standing in one room of the trailer, he can see and access the valves. He knows what it's flowing. He knows the valves are either open or closed. We can create a scenario to drop the pressure or change the pressure. Firefighter in the next room, which simulates the stairwell or where the control valves are in another part of the building. And so again, we'd like to have the pump operator at the apparatus, fire officer at the riser, firefighter in the hallway, in the hallway or the stairwell, and then the incident commander in the command post that says, hey, what happened? I lost pressure, or it's holding at 150 PSI, right? Pull up, hook up at 150 PSI, unless there's a sign marking the building that says, hey, pump this at 230, pump it at 300, whatever the case is. So that's where, again, those trailers, and we get them out. Our New Jersey team, our Chicago team, they've been doing that for a number of years, training on 13E, NFPA 13E specifically. So we're wanting to just spread that across the country and keep these trailers on the road. So again, we can mitigate the loss and most of all, save firefighters' lives. I do not want a firefighter dying in one of these buildings.
And if you want to see that trailer, October 5th and 6th, we're going to have the trailer at the Hazard Zone Conference in Cincinnati, Ohio, right? So
Yep.
There'll be probably an opportunity 3 or 4 times, I think, to run through that demonstration for people to see it there. So if you're in that region or you're going to make it to the conference, that's another place you'd be able to see that work.
Yeah, come join us at the Hazard Zone Conference. We will have the trailer. It'll be functional. We'll pump it. We'll do a burn every time because the front of the trailer, we can do a sprinkler burn so you can see it flow and then control the valves.
Speaking of the Hazard Zone Conference, you're going to be there. What else do you have on tap for people who are going to be there?
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of these big fires, again, in all different types of occupancies, from homes to high-rises and everything in between. Touch on a little bit of this latest research we're doing and give a little bit about where we think we're going.
The great thing with Shane is, it's a topic that people are intimidated about. It's some engineering, but you break it down to the firefighter level in such a way. I mean, today was 8 hours that just flew by because you're talking to us as firefighters, and I really appreciate that. One of the quotes, and I wrote down a bunch of quotes today, but one of the great quotes: "When the building is on fire, you're going to be the last one to the show. Don't ruin the ending." So, talk about that quote a little bit, and what do you mean by that?
Well, again, in some of these buildings, the owners have spent millions of dollars trying to protect their assets, right? And also to protect the workers that's in the building, and also to protect the firefighters that have to respond to it. So that's where we have an obligation to know a little about those systems and how to function with them. And the fire environment is so much different than it was a decade ago, and it's going to be much different a decade from now. And so that's where it's so important that says, hey, there's been somebody that's invested in this thing. It's on fire. There's an event in there. And we believe we have a fire a week in these type of facilities, that the sprinklers contain the fire. So we know that they work. Our effectiveness rate, as I show, is over 96%, has been for 100 years. And so again, we want that training and interaction to know that says, hey, make sure this show, as I say too, you didn't cause the fire, you didn't create the environment that it's in, those kind of things. Let's just make it all work. And as we say, we do a program called Partners in Progress. That's fire sprinklers and firefighters, an unbeatable team. And when you combine us together, like I said, we got the solution.
Well, we know that you were close to Bruno. He loved you and talked about you all the time. And every show that we do a timeless tactical truth. You want to hang out with this one?
Absolutely.
Tackle this one?
I remember those well, and I got
So our timeless tactical truth today is the 8 of diamonds, and it says the first 5 minutes can be worth the next 5 hours. The first 5 minutes can be, so in your industry, what does that mean to us?
Well, the first 5 minutes, again, fast water. We do everything, and we use hashtag fastest water because it's like you can't beat us, right? It's like we're already there. There's pipe, there's water. So as I said today, here's some fire hose. Here's a nozzle. But I also say we are never saying that we replace the firefighter, right? Because as I said today, we're here to control this event. So it's control, not totally extinguish, control. And so that's where the first 5 minutes, get command established, get somebody to the riser, get somebody to identify where the fire is before you lose all visibility, and get somebody to the fire pump. If there's a separate fire pump building and tank, get somebody that, make sure. That'll determine the next 5 hours. And over the next 5 hours, you know, the first 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or 2 hours, depending on the building, is what's going to make a difference in that. So you're going to need a lot of logistics and things. But I also would add to that now that says, if you mess up the first 5 minutes or the next 5 hours, you're going to be there for 5 days. And that's the last thing you want, because then the headline reads, largest loss, property loss in state's history. And nobody wants that fire on their hands.
You go to a lot of these fires after the fact, and you know, not to throw anybody under the bus, but what are you finding when they are there the first 5 minutes? Are they going at this like it's a residential fire without a fire protection system, or where do you see the breakdown at?
Yes, so they are, using standard operating procedures. I won't necessarily call it a house fire, but they're using their standard operating procedures with pre-connected hose lines and those kind of things. And hey, it's 1,000 feet across the breadth of this building. It's like, all right, you're not going very far. So again, that's where we're seeing, and most people just don't know. They just don't know that the system, that sprinkler's flowing 250 gallons of water a minute, right? They're like, whoa. I'm like, well, it's rated to flow at its pressure 160 gallons a minute, but when the pump's pumping 177 PSI, it's flowing way more water than that. And so they just don't know the fact that, hey, this thing's designed to run 2 hours by itself. Or in a Walmart store, right? It's like there's going to be several of those sprinklers operate in that Walmart store because the commodities have changed. The configurations of how we used to, you could buy one roll of paper towels. You can't hardly do that no more, right? You're getting the double jumbo roll, right? So that's where they're setting these places on fire, the fireworks, the charcoal lighter, that's where they're setting these buildings on fire. And it takes several sprinklers to contain that. And it's not a very nice environment in there. And that's why we're advocating, look, we don't want to kill anybody in these buildings because they don't have to die. The system will hold this in check, but you will have to put it out.
Yeah, you said something today, and you've said it at every single class, and it's funny, but it's really the truth. The sprinkler system, when that sprinkler system goes off because the fire is happening, and then we get notified that the sprinkler system's calling for mutual aid. Line's already been stretched, water's on the fire, right? The sprinkler system just saying, hey, I'm gonna need a little help here to finish mopping this thing up, which, I remember Bruno saying that 15 years ago. When we go to these big boxes, we're the overhaulers. We are not like the 100% fire suppression. We're the overhaulers at these events. And I'll never forget him saying over and over and over again, sometimes when you look at history, it might have been better if the fire department didn't show up. And we've got some cases like where the fire department got called, on Monday morning, workers showed up. Our building's full of smoke and there's water everywhere. Mm-hmm. And the fire was on, Saturday night, and for whatever reason, the alarm system didn't notify or whatever. And sure enough, the fire was, contained by the sprinkler system. So, the sprinkler system, I think it's just another way for us to think about it, that when that sprinkler system goes off, the first line's already been stretched. There's water on the fire, which comes down to your, the fastest water thing. But I think the firemen out there, all of us, officers, chiefs, whoever, we got to think about that when there's water flowing already, that's what buys us a little time to put together a plan. What's this really look like? Because we're going to be there for a while, which lines back up for that. What are we going to do in the first 5 minutes? Mm-hmm. I ain't stretching a 200-foot cross laying there and solving this thing and being back at quarters for dinner.
Right.
You were going to be here for a little while no matter what.
Yeah, and like our logo, we got a campaign called Fire Sprinklers Buy Time, Time Buys Life. And that goes for us as firefighters too. Because again, it's going to be, as we've seen in all those fires, and I show video after video and picture after picture, it's a nasty mess in there, even with a sprinklered fire. So it's like, we got to take that piece serious. And even in, I show those videos of the residential of us doing the test burns in conjunction with the energy code. This house is built to the energy code. It is nasty in there. You're going to need to rescue people. You're going to need to get to them and isolate yourself from the fire. Probably get them out a window or something. So it's a much different fire environment. And that's where I think that, again, get on the scene, hook up, supply the system, get your people to the riser, find where the fire area is, isolate that area, make sure the pump's running if it's got a pump, if it's that big of a facility, all those things. So again, it seems pretty simple, but we're not used to operating in it, and I can't encourage you enough. Get out there, meet the sprinkler contractors putting the sprinklers in the building, get with the building owners, their maintenance facility people, and work with them to know and understand your buildings and your systems, because they're all there to help you.
Well, we will put a link in our show notes so you can sign up for Shane's email that comes out on Friday. We really look forward to seeing you in Cincinnati on October 5th and 6th. And these big box workshops are well worth it. Today was a wealth of information for me, and I know the class was riveted. I mean, it was 8 hours, and it went by like that. So, Shane, just thank you so much for the partnership with the National Fire Sprinkler Association and for being here and participating in this, because it really is helping move the fire service along.
Glad to do it.
We got one last opportunity in 2023 to see the big box workshop. It's in Loveland, Colorado. I think there's maybe 19 seats left in it. So you can go to bshifter.com if you want to sign up for that. It'll be the last big box class of 23, and then we're working on 24 dates to continue working with Shane and the National Fire Sprinkler Association. Continue sending this message, trying to make a difference.
Yeah, come hang out with us. We'll have fun.
All right. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Thanks so much for listening to B Shifter today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe and tell your friends. You can also sign up for the B Shifter Buck Slip, and hopefully we'll see you at the workshop either in Loveland, Colorado, or we'll see you at the Hazard Zone Conference in October. Until next time, thanks for watching and listening to B Shifter.